Yeah, it's better.
Is that better?
Is that better? Yeah. Okay, put it on for now. Put it back on and then you can switch it off when we start the projection. Well, welcome. All right, so many people. I see everybody's learning that it's filling up so quickly, coming back. Also do this in English, quickly. So this is the third exhibition here at A to Z, a space where we look into different projects by graphic designers, graphic artists, that kind of push the definition of what graphic design can be, just to kind of broaden our perception of it. And looking at graphic design where it overlaps with other disciplines and performance and research and music and other disciplines. And just to announce, just for everybody here to know, the next opening will be on the 21st of November. It will be the Rodina. So I guess everybody who knows the work or their work will know that will be something quite exceptional. So save the date. And if you want to get regular information, join our mailing list on the website, or very old school with pen and paper up here next to the bar where the drinks are. So this is the wonderful exhibition by Patrick, Pulp. And this is actually a new series of work that Patrick did for this exhibition. And he's been overprinting current pages of the current news with different graphic shapes, some of them drawn, some of them found, some of them code-generated. And he leaves it intentionally ambiguous, that they can be appreciated as beautiful works of art. But of course, they also kind of feed into a discussion in a wider political context on news and really the times that we live in today. Squeeze in. Hier irgendwo dazwischen, on the floor. Ich glaube, es ist auch völlig okay, hier auf dem Boden zu sitzen. Ich glaube, man hier vorne ist auch noch Platz. At Patrick's feet. We have 5 spots at Patrick's feet. Just so you know, the prints are also for sale, as well as the overprinted posters that are around the corner. You'll see them as you approach the bar later on, probably. And if you're interested, you can approach me, or you can approach Johanna or Mary, who are just there behind the bar. What is for free is the newspaper that we have printed. Of course, it has to be a newspaper, which is here in the middle on that piece of furniture. Thank you. That's for free. You're welcome to take a copy.
If you get bored during the talk, just read the paper.
So, what else? So if there's any questions after the talk, or you said even during the talk.
Or during, yeah.
Exactly, go ahead. Just ask. And there will be questions for sure after the talk, so you can stay, we can discuss. There will be drinks for everyone, so you can just stay and mingle. And now it's Patrick's turn. And Patrick he doesn't really need introduction, but
yes,
from Liverpool, lives somehow in Berlin, but really teaches in Stuttgart and is never here. He's always traveling. So I think we're just very lucky to have you today.
By train.
So we're super lucky that you can be here today. I'm looking forward to hearing.
Thank you very much.
Hearing more on your work.
Thank you very much. And thank you, all of you, for braving the rain, these awful conditions to come here. I'm sorry that it's a little bit packed here. I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes or so. Okay, I've got a lot. As always, I've brought too much stuff, so I'm really going to whiz through it. But because it's late in the day, I think I'm just going to keep it moving. I'm going to kind of bombard you with loads of stuff. And then, as Anya mentioned earlier, I'm very happy if you stop me while I'm trying to explain what the hell's going on. If you disagree with something, or if you would like me to elaborate further, please just start shouting. It's completely fine. Right, can we have the lights, please? That's kind of good, isn't it, with the backlight? Right, Patrick. This is me in 60 seconds, okay, I think. I'm a graphic artist, I'm an author, and as Anya said, I teach. I'm a professor of communication design at Abiga Stuttgart. I was born in Liverpool, in Europe. And my design studies started in Liverpool. We have I don't know if it's kind of similar to the German system. So my basic introduction to art and design took place in Liverpool. I then applied to St Martin's in London, and something interesting happened. When I arrived there, it changed its name to Central St Martin's. Basically what happened was, to save money, the Prime Minister at the time, a woman called Margaret Thatcher, started to axe courses and started to join academies. So they joined two very, very different academies. The Central School of Art, that was very sort of rooted in 19th century arts and crafts. They joined it with the least likely or least compatible art college, which was St Martin's, which was much more sort of cutting edge, experimental. And it was a wonderful learning environment, this collision of two very, very opposing philosophies, basically. After Central St Martin's, I applied to the Royal College of Art for a further 2 years to study visual communication, specialising in illustration. Although so this is sort of late 80s or mid to late 80s. By then we decided that we weren't illustrators. It was far too sort of constricting or restricting a term for us, so we called ourselves image makers / type people, something like that. I'll mention the thesis I wrote at the Royal College of Art. It was about the art of the Russian avant-garde. I got very interested in Russian constructivism. Initially, I guess aesthetically, I found the aesthetics of designers or ex-artists like Alexander Rodchenko, what he was doing with typography was very, very exciting. And it was only later when I started to read more about it, somehow I kind of felt that I could identify with something that they started, which was this idea to abandon painting, art for art's sake, and to work, or to make work that was more directed or more sort of useful, functional for society. After I left the Royal College of Art, 2-year MA, I set up my first studio in London. I didn't get any work, there was very, very little work around, so I ended up working as a bicycle courier, a bike messenger for 18 months. And my plan, maybe it's the pizzas. My plan was to save up enough money to sort of get over to LA and be poor somewhere a bit warmer than very grey London in 1989, 1990.
It's okay, it's okay.
But sorry.
We can squeeze. People here on the floor if they want.
But basically, I was unable to save up enough money to get to LA, so instead I moved to Barcelona. And it was Barcelona in 1991, which was 1 year before the Olympic Games. And it was, at the time, it was the city that was on everyone's lips. It was the centre of, or the epicentre of Southern European design. And I was very lucky in that I found work directly related to the Olympic Games. I started freelancing, doing design work and also a lot of work for newspapers, local, national, Spanish newspapers, and then gradually more and more work outside of Spain. So lots of work in the UK, and that then led into work in New York as well. And around about the mid-90s, the internet happened, which obviously made the whole working process, or working remotely or at a distance, and made it a lot easier. But I started working freelance. By 96, 97, I set up my second studio, so Studio La Vista, which still exists. I still have a studio in Barcelona. Another important moment for me, I guess, was the publication of my first book, that I call Black and White, that I'll talk about in a while. And I established a silkscreen press about 10 years ago there. More about that later. And because of the press, I started to exhibit my work. So I was doing commercial work and also my own sort of personal work. I moved to Berlin. I started to come over to Berlin around about 2010. I discovered Berlin very, very late. I was fed up of hearing everybody telling me how amazing it was. So I thought I'd better come over at the worst possible time of year, which was Christmas. And it was that famous Christmas in 2010 when it was minus 27 degrees for about a month. And it was love at first sight. I felt instantly, I felt very at home here and very, very intrigued by the city. I needed to I decided that I needed to spend more time here. So I commuted a little bit, travelling between Barcelona and Berlin, and then eventually I got an apartment here and set up my third studio, which has occupied different locations, but at the moment I'm located in Neukölln. I continue exhibiting. Another important moment was the publication of my second book that I'll talk about a little bit later. And then in 2013, I started teaching communication design in Stuttgart. In January and February of this month, I was incredibly honoured and lucky and fortunate to be invited to spend 2 months working at Villa Massimo, the incredible Villa Massimo in Rome. So thank you, Germany. Basically, I've kind of, this looks really organised, isn't it? It's not, it's going to be chaos a little bit later. But I thought I'd better start well and then, the whole thing can sort of deteriorate. But I've vaguely broken it into 4 different sections. A brief introduction, then truth decay, work that kind of fed into or led me towards this installation here. I'll briefly mention protest and then talk slightly more at depth, without, as Anya said, without over-explaining the exhibition, but I'll give you a few pointers about some of the work that's in the room. Introduction. I'm going to plant a little idea in your minds, in the back of your minds right now. And that is that design is always a political act. Whether you like it or not. Designers are disproportionately responsible for a large proportion of the consumerism that occurs within society. Every choice you make as a designer has consequences for someone else. As a carrier of messages and a tool of influence. All design is political. I promise you that was the only effect that I'm Now, because I had, because I didn't want to really ramble on for too long, I've selected a couple of projects that somehow might be useful in understanding how this exhibition came together. And they are projects that deal with the times we're living in. Times of truth, which has been, so I forget who coined the term truth decay. But the first project I would like to talk about is a project that I made 18 months ago in the UK. That was you. And basically, I received a phone call from the Arts Council of Great Britain asking me, or via an organisation that were funding, asking if I would like to work with the theme, the subject of news, and I could approach it in any way I wanted to. It was an ongoing series of collaborations with artists. Some of the artists, so the illustrators might do political caricatures, something like that. In my case, I decided that I wanted to work with breaking news. I was sick of hearing Potusa, Donald Trump, going on about fake news, and I thought that I'd have a go myself. Okay, so my idea was very, very simply using a little bit of code with my brilliant assistant, Jonathan Alk, who's sitting here, just before I forget to thank you for this. I had a very, very simple idea that I was going to scramble invented local headlines from the public with real news sucked off the internet via RSS feeds. You all know what RSS feeds are, yeah? And then using a very, very simple bit of, well, very simple for me, because I didn't do all the processing. No. Jonathan looked after the processing. We found a way to scramble real news, or news that we were being fed offline, with news that was being, that we were gathering from local people. Now, when the organisation asked me if I was interested in doing this, of course I leapt at the opportunity. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And they asked me the kind of space that I would like to operate in. I explained the idea, they liked the sound of it, and they asked me what sort of a gallery space I would like to show this installation in. And I said that it was very important that it took place in public, it had to be a public space. I didn't want it in a gallery. And it had to be in a public space where there would be quite a lot of human traffic, okay, because I was looking for people to interact with whatever I was putting together. So quite early on, they proposed 2 or 3 sort of kind of cool spaces, and I guess the uncooler, or in their eyes, the uncooler space was a disused shop right in the centre of Liverpool, in the main market in Liverpool. And they sort of called me and they said, well, we found this funny old store, but it's kind of, it's a bit dilapidated, and you probably won't like it. And I said, look, send me a photograph. Are the people, my first question is, are the people sort of in the proximity? And they said, yeah, it's right in the middle of the market, but it's a bit kind of beaten up and stuff. So I said, this is absolutely perfect. And I travelled over to Liverpool, and I got out all of my kit, and I started to ask people, local people, if they would like to join in with the project. Okay, and these are like little post-it notes that I collected. The idea being that we then had them typewritten in and fed into the same loop that scrambled the local invented news or headlines or feelings that people had with the breaking news. It was actually very, very touching because children particularly involved with this. Then I kind of mixed the whole thing. It ran for 24 hours, and while I was doing it, I mean, it was all very, very scrappy and spontaneous, and I had no idea if it was going to work or not, but it kind of worked out pretty well. And while I was doing it, I got a phone call from the BBC asking if I'd like to do an interview, a live interview, on the evening after this crazy day. So I was completely destroyed. I was on my knees, but I agreed, and I did an interview for the top arts programme on Radio 4, BBC Radio 4, which is called Front Row. That's the link, if anybody's interested. There you go, interview. Now the great thing about the BBC, if you appear on one of these things, it suddenly sort of brings in interest from lots and lots of other places. And almost immediately I got a phone call from the London Design Festival, the organisers of the London Design Festival, and they asked me if I would like to make the same installation or develop the installation to run over a weekend at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Now, as it was the V&A, I thought I'd better smarten up my act a little bit. It would be probably not a good idea to turn up with post-it notes and stuff. So again, speaking with Jonathan, we found a way of making via QR codes to sort of optimize or to make the kind of the interaction with the public a lot faster. We found a way of linking a QR code to a very, very simple template. which meant that people could very, very simply type in headlines via a smartphone, and they would then, this is part of my branding for the V&A. And then basically, they gave me a space, and they said, what do you need for the space? I said, I want it to kind of feel like a newsroom sort of thing. You know, when you watch the news on the telly, all of these people working away in the background, all of these screens and things. So we had 2 beamers going, we had 4 or 5 PC monitors running. Oh, I've skipped a bit there. We actually built a computer terminal, a stripped-down computer terminal, so that people and kids who didn't have smartphones could also type in stuff. And again, the same way that we did in Liverpool, we scrambled everything and left it running over a weekend. Sorry. After the V&A, I got a call from the city of Manchester, and in a similar way to the Liverpool shop situation, they found a very, very visible shop front right in the centre of Manchester. And they asked us this time if the installation could last for, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. So we found a way, there was a very, very reduced budget, we found a way of sort of borrowing and stealing screens from people, using Raspberry Pis and things, cheap sort of computers that we could leave running there. And we set up the whole thing. And these printouts from the back were random sort of screenshots and texts of things, of messages that were coming through. Now the interesting thing about Manchester was, because it was on for 2 weeks, the QR codes really, really got out there. And there were, pretty early on, we had absolutely no idea who was tweeting this stuff, who was sending in this content. Since that, I've kind of shown it all over the place. I've shown it in Barcelona. I showed it in Novi Sad in Serbia. I did a workshop with local design students there. And then while I was at the Villa Massimo, I thought it would be a great idea to try and do something. So by this stage we're on sort of breaking news version 3.0 or 4.0, something like that. And then I had this kind of really crazy idea to mount projectors inside a car. We found a way of kind of hot wiring the car battery so that we could run a projector directly off the car, and that would give us complete autonomy. We could then drive around Rome, beaming shit all over the place. Now, for me, the main target was the British school in Rome, okay, which is this very, very beautiful neoclassical facade. But there was a little bit of traffic, there was sort of police surveillance nearby, but I had a very, very fixed idea what I wanted to do there. So to kill a bit of time, we thought we'd head to the Colosseum. So with a car full of projectors and students, we drove over towards the Colosseum, and we got to the Colosseum, and every 10 metres there was a policeman standing with a machine gun. So we thought maybe this isn't such a good idea. Right? So we started to kind of do little tests. I'll show that again. Little tests, sort of beaming on vegetation and stuff like that. This is actually at the main. These are like tests at the Villa Massimo. But sure enough, the time came to go to the British school in Rome. And I think around about 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. By this stage, I'm wetting myself. I haven't had so much fun in years. Because you drive down the street beaming shit all over the place. And it was just fantastic to see the reaction of pedestrians. Because they're kind of looking around, trying to work out where the hell all of this stuff is coming from. Now, at the British school in Rome, I had prepared a very special message, which was, I think I can say this, it was fuck Brexit, okay? Very, very, very big. Fuck Brexit, okay? Over the main facade of the British school in Rome. And we drove by several times. Occasionally the police cars would sort of approach, so we'd hide in the bushes, we'd sort of drive in the car and like hide in the bushes and things. I'm just dying now by this stage. I just can't take it anymore. And we're filming it, and I'm looking at the film, all of the footage that we've got, and it just looks absolutely hilarious. And the plan was the next morning to post it on social media. The next morning, with all of the projectors, all of the cameras, all of the videos, all of the movies that we'd shot, we're in the back of this hire car, and somebody in Rome stole the entire project, okay, from the night before. So I have absolutely no record of it whatsoever. Yeah, a bit of a bummer, but in a funny kind of way, it's the perfect ending for that project. And there were definitely people filming it, so I think it's only a matter of time before this material emerges. But anyway, yeah, that's breaking news. The next plan, because we've been doing it now for, like, as I say, like 18 months or so. Ideally, it has to end up. I don't know where Oklahoma is, but I just instinctively feel that it needs to end up in this shopping mall in Oklahoma. Okay. And the plan is with Jonathan and Fabi, who I also believe is here. We're trying to raise a bit of money to go over to Oklahoma, set it up, hit the play button, and basically get the fuck out of there, because it's probably going to end quite badly. Anyway, open collab. I don't really know where this fits in, but I'll show it anyway. It's like vague, I guess. It's sort of generating quite interesting. That's boring. Don't worry about that. While I was in Rome for my 2 months in January and February, I didn't have any printing facilities whatsoever, and I was sort of frustrated that I couldn't produce things. So, and also, I don't know if anyone's been to Rome recently, but it's an amazing, amazing city, but it's kind of dysfunctional in a great kind of way. But if you want to buy, like, art materials and things, it's incredibly difficult. Even Amazon doesn't work, but not that I normally use Amazon, but it was an emergency situation, and even Amazon took 10 days to deliver stuff. Anyway, I got my hands on a laser printer, and I decided that instead of silkscreening things, I would use a printer to sort of layer found imagery. So I'm mixing my own photographs, high culture, ancient Rome, contemporary, shitty graphics, chucking it all together by running sheets of paper through, in a very sort of random kind of way, through these very, very basic office printers, A4 laser printers. This was the space at Villa Massimo. I was kind of working on the walls there. My idea being, I love cliches actually, and I thought I like the idea of like making a Roman mosaic on my wall. It's sort of that obvious, really. And I would sort of go out every morning, and I'd sort of look down at the pavements and like pick up bits of stuff, and I go to exhibitions and things, and basically each day I would this is my timeline. Okay, this horizon was my timeline. So I'd sort of pull off bits of paper and then feed them back through the printer and sort of continue to layer images. And when I came, don't worry about that. When I came back from, there's no time. When I came back from Rome, I did 2 or 3 days teaching at Chelsea School of Art. Oh, God, there's even more. Sorry about that. Yeah. Oh no, it's going on forever. Well, the idea is that I did like 2 or 3 days teaching at Chelsea College of Arts in London. And if I'm being brutally honest, I was having such a great time in Rome that I didn't really prepare very well what I was going to teach them in Chelsea. And as I was travelling there, I suddenly thought, why don't I just share this way of working with these students, see what happens. So I walked into the room and I said, right, we're going to work on this thing. I gave them a subject. The subject was, I think I called it climate. Climate as in not just, global warming, but political climate. It was about now, the now. And we started to kind of print things. The printer I'd been lent ran out of toner immediately. So I then spent 2 or 3 hours running around London to get more toner, and I couldn't find more toner. And at this stage, I'm starting to panic slightly because the whole workshop relies on laser printers. Anyway, after 2 hours in the rain running around without any success, I got a phone call from Chelsea saying, "Hey Patrick, we found more toner and it's starting to look really good." I'm like, "What are you talking about? It starting to look really good." Yeah, we've got it working, we understand how the whole thing works, and people are just going crazy, they're kind of freaking out, like printing stuff all over the way. Get back here as soon as possible. And so I walked back. Yeah, okay, forget that. Next time. God, it goes on forever, doesn't it? So I headed back to Chelsea, and I walked into the space where the workshop was taking place, and I had this wonderful moment when I realised that they didn't need me to be there at all. I'd just given them this idea, and because of this stupid toner thing that kind of distracted me, I left them alone, and they completely got it, they completely embraced it. Got a few of these things. This is a workshop I using the same idea in Poland. So after the Chelsea School of Art thing, I thought it might be quite interesting to put it out online, just like a free workshop for people, anybody who's interested. So via Instagram, the dreaded Instagram, I put a link where anybody can just download this info pack that explains how the whole thing works. And more than the wall, you're probably all thinking, "Oh my God, it looks nice that small," but if you get up close, it probably looks a bit shit, doesn't it? It actually looks pretty good. But more, or as important as the final output for this, it's just my aim of the project was to encourage students to collaborate. I don't know about you lot, but my students in Stuttgart are very resistant to the idea of collaborating. So this was a way of tricking people into collaborating somehow. And since then, it's just sort of happening all over the place, actually. I haven't had a look. Every time I open the, direct messages, it's going on somewhere else. It's lovely. It's happening. It's happened in 5 continents now over the last 6 months.
Patrick, sorry,
Yep.
you say collaboration, that means each layer is done by someone else?
Sorry, yeah, I'm explaining it really badly, aren't I? Download the info pack and it's explaining. The idea is that when you are, so you feed, everybody creates a layer, okay, independently, and then very, very randomly, you just start to send it through laser printers, and the laser printers put the whole thing together. So the idea is that you don't sit there sort of trying to design the perfect poster. It's not about that. You just generate forms in response to the subject that you're given. And then it's a way of sort of forcing unexpected juxtaposition, something like that. Randomness, that stuff that we all love. It's taking place all over the place, in Australia, in Russia, in the States, in the UK, in Germany, more and more, in Italy, in Vietnam, which is interesting. And I think here we go, this is Dortmund. Anybody from Dortmund? Lars Hansen. This is definitely my favourite. So this was an all-women group in Cairo. I have no idea who these people are. But they used it, everybody gets to pick their own topic, and they chose the topic, inspire women in Cairo. That made me very happy indeed. Yeah, okay, so good things can come through social media. Protest. I really cringe when people call me the political designer guy. I hate that. I really hate that. Although I must confess that there are moments that my work probably touches it more than most designers. Protest. I'm not even going to talk about this actually. This is a book that I did a few years ago. And it was a commission from an English publisher called Lawrence King. I'd been working using stencils since my student days at the Royal College of Art, and a guy called Angus Hyland, who is one of the Pentagram partners, is the advisor to Lawrence King. And Angus remembered my work from the 80s, and because stencils were in with the kids because of Banksy and people like that, by 2011 I got a phone call asking if I'd like to make a book of my work about stencils. And I said, yeah, I love the idea of doing a book, but I don't want it to be about my work. I really don't want it to be about my work. So my idea, very, very simply, was to sort of look back at images of popular protest in the 20th century and identify all of the main symbols and icons lifted from, I don't know, badges, from banners, from, raised fists, Paris 68, all of that stuff that we all know very, very well. And then the idea was to put it all into a book. And then the book, you get hold of the book and you sort of destroy the book, you pull stencils out of the book, and then you can start to put together your own visual messages. It's a very important part of this for me was that there's no stencil in the book that says, no war. Okay, it's not about that. You can say, war is great with this book if you want to. Okay? I'm not telling people, hopefully people aren't using it to say that. But I'm not telling people what they should be saying. I'm merely giving people the tools to be able to put together visual messages. So you combine things. I love it. People kind of use this to do workshops with kids and stuff, and I really love it when people don't stick to the stencils. When they sort of go a bit freeform, or they kind of look at the stencils and go, oh no, I much prefer my heart, and then they sort of do their heart in conjunction with some of my stuff. That's lovely. Kids are great. The way that they embrace it and just completely destroy the stencils is absolutely beautiful. This is 2 minutes of light relief before I get to the main thing, which is talking a little bit more about this. But with my students in Stuttgart, I have like an ongoing discussion about what effective ways of communicating, and especially if you're embracing or trying to tackle socio-political themes. What is the best way? Is a poster the best way to do this? Does a poster actually change anything? I've got very mixed feelings about this. Obviously, I completely love posters. But I thought it might be interesting to sort of investigate some other mediums or ways of doing this. So I had this is a really stupid, this is like the really stupid, this is where the talk does that. I mean, not that it was up there anyway, but it really does that now. Somebody said to me, okay, so if you're not, if posters aren't working, what is good? What are you doing? And I said, well, I don't know, I'll do some t-shirts, some political t-shirts. Now, I'm a kind of all in black kind of guy. The idea of wearing a t-shirt with a political slogan that absolutely horrifies me. But I thought somehow it might be sort of interesting or fun to investigate the idea of making work on things that involve humans instead of sticking work on a wall. So I had this really stupid idea to invent a fashion label. And because I've got a huge ego, I call it Patrick Thomas. And because I didn't want people to take it too seriously, I thought if I do a really, really bad label for it, and I do absolutely terrible kerning, people might forgive me. They might understand that I wasn't taking myself too seriously. This is the little label that gets sewn in the back of the t-shirt. I sent the artwork off to my label producer, and very, very kindly they offered to sort of re-kern it and to make it look sort of proper again. And I said, no, it's really meant to be like that. And this is an idea. I mean, this is the very first t-shirt. I'm only going to show one t-shirt actually, but this is my fuck Brexit t-shirt. My idea being, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh my God, he's using Arial bold and arrow, isn't he? And I am. I absolutely love Arial, especially in conjunction with Chinese letter forms. There is nothing sexier in the world. It always looks brilliant. And my idea with this is, if you're in England these days and you walk down the street with a t-shirt saying "fuck Brexit," you probably get 10 metres before somebody jumps on you. Okay, whereas if you wear my t-shirt that still says fuck Brexit, it will give you like an extra 2 or 3 minutes. By the time they've worked out what the fuck's going on. Yeah, I don't know if there are any Chinese people here. I'm not entirely sure what that says. I hope it says love and friendship. There you go, fuck Brexit. Pulp. Not the band. Pulp. Background. Here's some background. This is the printing press for the New York Times, and I don't know if it still exists. And I could watch this video for hours and hours. We're not going to, don't worry. But I thought it might be sort of quite nice to remember what newspapers are, this sort of dying thing, how beautiful they are. The production of incredible machines. I was very lucky, and I kind of realised this in retrospect, but I'd sort of always worked with newspaper since my student days. Usually there were commissions that would be printed on newspaper, so I was incredibly fortunate to work for many years for the book review section of the New York Times. And out of all of the design jobs that I was doing at the time, the one thing that I most enjoyed was working for the press. And it's a strange thing, because press work is the worst paid. It's definitely the most stressful, okay, because you have very incredibly short deadlines. The printing's crap. Actually, no, the printing's pretty good. But somehow it was a drug. I was addicted to it. This idea of sending in a JPEG on a Friday evening, and the idea of this JPEG being printed, I don't know how many million readers the Times has, but this idea of sort of really reaching into people's lives, ending up on a breakfast table with an American family. This idea really was highly addictive for me. So the newspaper thing was always there. This is the book that I did. So in 2005, I put out my first book called Black and White. I'm not going to show it to you. But basically it was, I just looked at a lot of the illustration work that I'd been doing in the previous 15 or 20 years. And I took it, brought it all together, removed all of the colour to somehow emphasise the kind of conceptual nature of the work, I guess. And I put out this very, very simple publication. I then did a few sort of book like kind of not a book tour, but like several book presentations, a couple in London, one in Manchester, one in Liverpool, one in Barcelona. And I would start talking to wherever I was going to be doing the book signing, and then usually they would have an exhibition space and say, hey Patrick, it'd be great if you could like show some of your work, we can frame some of it and turn it into an exhibition. And I explained that I was very, very uncomfortable for this idea. It didn't make any sense for me, because for me the beauty of newspaper work is the fact that it's very, very ephemeral. Yeah, it has a very, very short lifespan. So instead of hanging framed pictures of newspaper clippings, I decided to output it as a sort of large format newspaper. People ask me if this book is still available. It is available. Who said algorithms are really evil? I love algorithms. If they come up with this kind of premise. I think it's, and this is not fake news, by the way, it fluctuates a little bit, but I wouldn't spend more than 5,000 on this book. Newspaper. I had an exhibition in Dusseldorf, whenever it was, 3 or 4 years ago, that I gave the title Detritus, and it was quite similar to the work that I was doing in Villa Massimo, just sort of walking around Berlin, homing in on things, picking up stuff, photographing things, and then throwing it all together. And I thought it would make sense if the poster for the exhibition was printed on a piece of detritus, on a piece of rubbish. So I silkscreened the posters onto like old copies of newspapers and things. I could talk at length about the beauty of working with newsprint. I'll tell you, I've actually got 10 reasons. I'll give you the first 5, if I can remember them. 1, if there are any students in the house, it's free. It's great. Number 2, it ages beautifully. Newsprint ages beautifully. It's like it's an organic material that just continues to evolve. And I'll talk about this in a while. Number 3, it's ecologically, it's ticking all the right boxes. Number 4, I find it an incredibly charismatic material. I love the fact that it's made out of, pulp. So it could be love letters, or it might once have been, parking fines, or it might have been like somebody's old school homework or something. I love that. I think that the material somehow retains this incredible, or has this incredible DNA. Is that 4 or 5? I could keep. Anyway, I'll shut up. You get the idea. Newspapers cool. Oh look, probably the most important thing, and that is very, very important in this situation, is that 2 things actually. If you make an edition on newspaper, because each page of the newspaper is unique, it's different, each of your prints is also unique. It's a very interesting sort of space between the edition and the original. I call it, I don't know how to pronounce it, is it quasi editions or quasi editions? Like almost editions. So somewhere in between the 2. This is an area that I'm very interested in exploring with my work. And finally, I love the fact that it freezes a moment in time. So when I printed this poster, all of that stuff was going down at that moment in time. I love the fact that it just stops things and it captures this moment. I'm a huge fan of William Morris. And one day, I'm actually putting together a talk for a German public, and it's going to be about William Morris and the importance of William Morris, and how Walter Gropius, completely and utterly obsessed about Morris, and how the Deutsche Werkbund, Hermann Mutesius, was sent over to the William Morris workshops in, I don't know which year, but whenever it was, in the 19th century, to spy. It was all very amicable, but he was sent over to sort of, and then asked to report back to the new German government, because there was this intention to improve the quality of German-made products. So William Morris to the Bauhaus, direct contact. I'm digressing. This is the first print, and it's actually there on the wall. It's a William Morris willow bough design, which is probably his most famous wallpaper design. My auntie, so before I went to St Martin's and started to learn more about William Morris, he was always incredibly uncool, because I related him to my auntie's living room, and I had no idea that he was essentially the first multidisciplinary artist out there. Okay, he was not only a designer, he was a publisher, he was a poet, he was a political activist. He opened the first design shop in the world, 100 years before Habitat and IKEA and things like that. And one day, for whatever reason, I had this idea, in homage to Morris, that I was going to print the willow bough motif onto some newspaper. This is me in my studio in Neukölln, and this is an installation for a gallery in Norway that is going to be happening later on in 2020. Okay. Now, basically, this is William Morris, the willow bough print, printed over copies of, I think it was Bild und Frankfurter Allgemeine. And without wanting to sort of over-explain it, because you can kill it, I think if you explain things, you can really kind of limit things. I guess essentially it's got 2 potential sort of ways that you can interpret it. One is just as a very beautiful sort of graphic. But I think when I saw the way that the Morris's completely unrelated motif was interacting with the news underneath it, it triggered an idea somewhere in the back of my head. And I decided to kind of develop the series And I was convinced that this was a stroke of genius, and nobody had done this before, and it was absolutely amazing, and it was great. The euphoria didn't last very long, because obviously Pablo Picasso got there a lot earlier. Hannah Hoch, Kurt Schwitters. It's actually a self-portrait of Kurt Schwitters. I only saw that today when I was putting it together. Robert Rauschenberg. Very important influence on me, a guy called Richard Hamilton. Richard Hamilton designed the White Album of the Beatles, if you're wondering who he is. Another British artist of Italian descent, Edoardo Paolozzi, who had a very, very important connection with Berlin. He had a studio in, I think, '89. He was on the DAAD, whatever it's called, International Artist Scholarship residency, and he always referred it to one of his happiest and most prolific years, working on Cottbusser Dam, just around the corner from my studio. Then I suddenly realised that it's all over the place. Artists have always worked on the newspaper. What was I thinking?
Patrick.
Edward.
New York.
Thank you very much. I'll include that. I'll include that in the next one. Yeah, so it's been out there for a long time. This is Anthony Tapio's. Most of this work is kind of collaged in. I mean, I guess that I'm doing it in a slightly different way. I don't know. But I thought, and obviously, that is not Anthony Tapio's. That caption is completely wrong. This is Merritt Oppenheim wearing a newspaper jacket. Anyway, I was undeterred. I continued to work with newspaper, and this was like a very sort of early version of what you see in the space now. This was for a kind of pop-up exhibition that I did in Novi Sad in Serbia, whenever that was, a year ago. It was 2 years ago. Nenad very kindly invited me 1 year ago. Okay, so what's it all about? What's hanging on the wall? What's he going on about? Pulp is my response to the reality of living in an age of truth decay. The work interacts with randomly sourced daily newsprint, which, until relatively recently, although that is debatable, was the traditionally respected source of factual information. By layering found, drawn and code-generated graphic forms in an aleatory way, utilising the mechanical process of screen printing, intentionally ambiguous, the prints may be appreciated for their abstract beauty. As I explained earlier, you've got a sort of double way of interpreting it, and as a celebration of the disappearing broadsheet newspaper format. However, they might also conceal a darker significance that suggests manipulation, concealment, and censorship. These are the newspapers that are free only today. Is that right? Oh, yeah. All right, can't see. Only take maximum 2. Because there are a lot of you. A colleague of mine from Stuttgart, the brilliant Professor Daniel Martin Feig, who's a very close friend of mine, he's written a text that completely nails it, I think. I'm not going to read it to you, but please feel free to pick up a newspaper. That's on the inside of the newspaper. I'm very, very quickly going to run through a few things. Then we'll turn the lights on. If people want to get out and get some fresh air, have a cigarette, that's completely, go home. That's completely fine. You're free to. But I'm going to be here to sort of elaborate a little bit further if people would like to either ask me questions about what I've shown here or ask me questions about the work on the show. But finally, for the last 2 minutes, I'd like to point out 2 or 3 little things, little clues for you. The first thing is the way that I've framed these. It's actually it's an integral part of the artworks. I talked earlier about the fragility, the fact that newspaper is incredibly, it just changes, it evolves, it gets damaged very, very easily. I wanted to somehow preserve them. And I was looking for the best way of doing this. And then I remembered Museum visits. There's a very beautiful museum in Oxford called the Pitt Rivers Museum. I don't know if anyone who's ever been there. It's full of these incredible, beautiful, very beautiful Victorian glass cases where they pin out butterflies and God knows what else. I thought it might be quite nice to sort of treat these in quite a scientific way and protect them with these very, hopefully, very beautiful wooden cases. Oh, maybe I can go a bit bigger on that. This is incredibly important. Not many people will notice this, but you will notice it on the prints. The prints are actually quite brutally held by blades into the wood. Okay. So again, I guess there's a kind of reference to the butterfly thing, the pinning sort of thing. And brutal though it might seem, it seems to be the kind of cleanest, most effective way to hang the newspapers. The idea is that the newspapers over time will deform, depending on the humidity in the space where they're being shown, exposure to sunlight, things like this. They will age more or less rapidly. Very, very quickly, you can see each of the prints is one of 25, okay? So then, strictly speaking, they're not editions, because as you can see here, when you print over different pages of newspapers, you get like different interaction with the backgrounds. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but a couple of them I will. Some of them are just sort of abstract forms. This is not a QR code, this is an Aztec code. Do you know about Aztec code? They're the codes that are used on boarding passes. And they can actually carry, pretty lengthy texts and things. In this case, it says, if you have an Aztec code reader, you need to install it. Then they don't come, pre-installed on your smartphone or whatever. But if you take a photograph of it, it will tell you that social media is ruining your life. Again, I explained earlier how with Jonathan we've been sort of investigating, processing, throwing stuff together in a very random, letting the code do the work for us. I like the idea of, we're obsessed with the algorithm now, especially Instagram users. We're completely fed up with the whole thing. I thought it would be quite interesting to use a bit of code to generate one of the images, which I think is up there. So I didn't do that. I just typed in a couple of parameters and it sort of did itself. That was the date that I did it, so it was on the 14th of August. This is an ISB, a 13-digit ISBN code, and it is from Donald Trump's first book, How to Get Wealthy. Folks. Charles Dickens. I wanted to put Charles Dickens alongside William Morris. It kind of made sense somehow. And I was kind of rereading a few sort of passages from Dickens' novels, trying to work out if I could, get something that somehow would sort of fit with the idea of the exhibition, concept of the idea of the exhibition. Sorry. And I opened up A Tale of Two Cities. I don't know if anyone's read it, but it could have been written yesterday. Yes. Okay. I will read it out. It's important. It was the best. It explains the mess we're in now. Basically, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. And it carries on, which is why it's flows off the bottom of the print. I thought I'd have to, so if I've got, one of my Brit heroes, I'd have to bring in a German hero, Joseph Albers, Homage to the Square. This is like the diagram. He had like 3 or 4 different sort of constellations or systems for generating these paintings. This is one of them. This is the 1 by 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit combination. Somehow completely random, doesn't fit in even remotely with the subject matter in the room, but somehow I like this interaction, the way it interacts with little flashes of information popping through the white gaps. Aquapat, this is the US military camouflage that's being phased out actually right now. I think in September 2019 they started to phase it out. But it is military uniform that they use when the US military are on urban operations. This is not a QR code, this is a data matrix. It's a section of a data matrix. And the subject of that one is top secret. You will never know what that is. Oops. This is a very there are two versions of this. This is a sort of far more painterly version of this one. This is the kind of clean, much smaller grid, and a much more sort of expressive grid. And finally, it was important that one of the sheets of newspaper was completely blacked out. Although it is not completely blacked out because you can still see the content through the ink because of the quality of the ink. I'm done. That's it. Thank you all very, very much. Well, I was 10 minutes over when I said I was going to be. I'm sure some of you probably have to leave or probably have to get some fresh air. That is completely fine. Don't worry about it. But it would be absolutely wonderful. As Anya said, I'm here to answer questions. We can either do it here or now or just walk around.
Are there any questions?
Are there any sort of quick questions now? I know I explained everything so incredibly well. It's sort of almost impossible that somebody might have a question. If not, I'm going to be around for the rest of the evening. Please join us for a glass of wine. Yes, there is a question. Don't leave. Everybody back inside. Sorry, I can't hear this guy.
Maybe it's a weird question, but I'm interested in the process of how you work. So you do the ideation by yourself, or you surround yourself with your team?
My team is me, basically. But depending on the project I'm working on, I'm incredibly lucky that I can pull in far more talented people than I am, and sort of respond to whatever problem I have. But it's actually quite a personal, private, lonely endeavour, this. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. I'm a big believer in sketchbooks, collecting stuff. If you just see something that catches your eye, maybe you want to pick it up or take a photograph of it and stick it in a Dropbox folder or print it out and hang it on your bedroom wall or something, because it might well come in, 15 years later. It might save your life. But yeah, I've got a big archive of things that I constantly refer back to. If I'm struggling, if I'm having a bad week or a bad month or a bad year, I'll always sort of refer back to this sort of secret supply of stuff that I've accumulated over the years. But yeah, no, there's not really a team here.
Thank you.
Well, you're looking at the team.
No. No.
Sadly.
I was interested in your way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Having said the importance of collaboration, I'm such a bloody hypocrite. Anyway, we can talk about it over a glass of wine. It'd be lovely if we could have, while you're all here, it'd be wonderful if we had like one or two questions.
I have a question. I was wondering if you do the overprints.
Yeah.
Afterwards, do you scrutinize it? Do you look at it?
Yeah.
Would there be certain combinations that you think
I
fail?
I did it.
Do you actually look at what it highlights, what it conceals? Yeah. Is there something else?
I kind of sped through that too quickly. So I'm interested in this sort of unplanned encounters between things, but at the same time, the newspapers, the backgrounds that I'm printing on are actually, a lot of work has gone into sourcing out the right kind of pages that might somehow combine well with whatever's going to sit on top of it. But yeah, it's not like I sit around with a sheet of newspaper there and an image there and kind of wonder if the whole thing is going to sort of work out. It really isn't like that at all. I just chuck the whole thing. When I've got like a good stock of backgrounds, I will then very, very mathematically, very automatically just sort of overprint them. And then to get, and this is crucial actually, to pull out the 25 of each image that I like, or each quasi-edition that I like, I will print between 40 and 50. Okay, and then there's a very heavy sort of editing moment when I discard in the recycling bin, when I discard the pages that don't work. But yeah, you are seeing a sort of highly edited. Well, it's between kind of completely random and at the same time very highly sort of, it's not controlled, but do you know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of selections, various stages of selection throughout the process. In case everybody is wondering why I've got an issue with the Frankfurter Allgemeine, it's not true. You've got the Bild there, you've got the Süddeutsche Zeitung. I was slightly, it was important for me this time that they all had the same format. Okay, now newspapers have different formats. As I mentioned in the exhibition text, it's also like a celebration of this disappearing broadsheet format. But I don't have anything against the Frankfurter Allgemeine. If there's any reporters from the Frankfurter Allgemeine, it's nothing personal. Okay. It's all incredibly random.
I have one quick question.
Yep.
Curiosity. Do the contents of the news matter for you? I mean, do you also pay attention to
Have I read every? Is that what you're saying?
Not reading, but it's screening or about what
Yeah.
news goes on
Yeah.
underneath,
Yeah.
or it doesn't matter. It's more about the
Yeah, I mean when I
design
discuss.
or the pattern that.
Yeah, so the first selection, even before the print hits the surface, I've already sort of made quite a rigorous selection of the work. So I'm kind of, obviously I'm reading, not every article in depth, but I'm definitely having a look at all of the titles, headlines, sorry, that are happening on each sheet. And then once everything has been printed, then again I'll sort of run through everything. Because my German's not so good, there might be a few little things. But again, it's sort of part of the kind of randomness somehow.
I think that was your question.
It's
Yeah.
not a very personal question, but it's very fascinating that it's projecting into public space when
Yes.
you're driving around. With
Don't do it. You'll
Well,
get
it's
arrested.
not a question, but why would you get arrested? Because it's freedom of speech, and you're not. It's no physical interaction in the sense
Well-
of putting a poster. Or it's my question. Did you inquire the?
I think if we tried to get planning permission for it, I'd still be there now. You know, quite often it's better just to kind of get on with it. Ignore I said students in the room. Ignore that I said that. Okay, but
No, but because
But what would be
it's
the
not
charge?
physical. Yeah.
It's not. I mean, you're
I
not
think
damaging anything.
I think
you're
driving
just
down a busy
ignoring-
road, beaming shit all over the place, in the context of traffic, you probably aren't going to get very far until a traffic policeman pulls you over. For obvious reasons.
For security reasons.
Yeah,
Not for communication.
Yeah,
There must
yeah.
be
I mean, otherwise people would just be.
Is it projecting or the-
Again, I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked into this.
So why did you choose only German newspapers?
Because we're in Germany.
No, I get you're also in Germany. You can have international newspapers.
They're very expensive. no. Basically, this is like part of a small part of like a bigger thing. And when back at the studio, I've got a zillion. Every time I travel, I collect everything across the political spectrum. I will pick up the local press. The problem is that the format. There is an incredible variety of formats there, and it's very hard to make an edition that is going to work on 16 different. I mean, it's completely impossible actually. It's not impossible, but it's not the way that I wanted. I wanted to retain a certain amount of control over it. The Daily Telegraph was only 15 millimeters too short for it, and I considered using that, and at the last minute I sort of pulled out. I don't know. Just imagine this as being sort of part one of something that will evolve. So it will become more. I guess when it's being shown in London next year, so I will start to sort of feed in the local press there. Maybe maybe that's quite a nice way to do it. Whenever it travels, I just sort of add whatever local stuff's going on. But for Germany, this kind of felt right somehow.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm quite interested because many times you kind of try to avoid the political kind of core of your work.
Yeah.
But what I find very interesting is like when you're talking about the exhibition, many times you're kind of telling us the story about this layer that you're putting. And this kind of adds a lot to the whole show. Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah, but you can interpret,
Yeah, but that's exactly my question.
It's very ambiguous, you know.
Exactly,
is
but that's
is it a nice, pretty graphic?
Exactly,
that
but
happens to be on a piece of newspaper.
that's
or
where
is it deliberate. Yeah.
That's exactly where it comes to my question.
Yeah.
Would you like at certain point that it will be delivered, that people can know what it is, or you just want to leave it as a beautiful print?
As I think.
I don't know, publication or you know.
I mean, I think I tried to explain in the beginning that I'm a lot of my work is very ambiguous, and I like to sort of leave. This sounds like a complete cop-out, doesn't it? I don't mean it to. But I do like, if possible, to leave it open to interpretation. And as I mentioned, I think there is a danger that when I start to say that QR code says social media is ruining your life, it's kind of suddenly. It doesn't kill it. In that case, it's all right, which is why I mentioned it. But if that sort of killed other ideas that people had when they were sort of projecting onto it, then I think that's something that I'd rather avoid somehow.
No, but it's just in terms of what I think is interesting with your work is because you're creating a document on a document.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because those codes, I mean, now we know what it is, but I doubt in 20 years that people will have the same, you know, they will not be so familiar with that, with the same way. So they become almost like a graphic sign again.
But I quite like that. I like the fact that in the same way that truth decays and disappears and people forget and it's sort of misinterpreted, I don't mind that. I quite like the idea that, you know, especially the QR coding kind of things will become obsolete. You know, a better system will come along, and people would look back at them 50 years and go, "Oh my God, you know, what was all that about?" He really was living in the dark ages in 2019. I'm really not giving you a very convincing answer there.
No. I think it's totally interesting. I mean, I almost like would expect that you would say that. But it's just interesting, like in terms of what you want, how much you want to say.
I want what people find in it. That's what I want. And if somebody can appreciate a beautiful willow bough, that's completely fine by me. And if somebody sees a willow leaf crossing the face of somebody, is it deliberate? Why did I pick that one? I mean, I want to leave that one open to interpretations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over the years, do you find you kind of revisit, because this notion of overprinting, the way you work, do you find you talk about recycling some of the stuff which doesn't kind of hit at this particular point?
Yeah.
But do you kind of ever go back and re-explore it or take it further, just through the nature of kind of the work you do?
Do I go back to like the old stuff?
Yeah, sort of take it further, or just kind of re-look at it at a different point, and then.
I constantly refer back to it, but I don't. There's a danger that when you sort of look at stuff that you liked 20 years ago, you can start to fall into this kind of retro bracket. And when I was working on this, I posted a couple of things online. I said, "Hey, I'm working on newspapers, blah blah blah." And somebody very two people actually very kindly said, "Hey, we've got like loads of old GDR newspapers. We'll send them over right now." And I said, no, it's not about that. It has to be about 2009. It has to be. This was all printed 1 month before the exhibition. Apart from that one, that's like 18 months old. It had to be about a specific moment in time.
Yeah, it's interesting because of the overprinting, the fact that you can kind of then change the content piece at another time, you know, or kind of bring it in.
Do you know what? The overprinting is something that has always been there in my work. I mean, not as. You know, this is the sort of most simplistic take on it, I suppose. Although no, that's not the right way to explain it. But when I was painting, I started off as a painter, and I went to see a talk when I was at the Royal College of Art by a New York artist, comic artist, Christoph, you'll know him, a guy called Gary Panter. Do you know Gary Panter or Raw Magazine? Anybody know Raw Magazine? And Gary Panter completely opened my eyes. He showed some work that he'd been working on, and basically he was combining two paintings. And it was all very, very manual. And he was just layer it, so he did like a background, well, not a background, a painting, and then layer it with a completely and utterly unrelated acrylic painting over the top. And that, for me, that was like a eureka moment. I just thought, that's fucking amazing, you know. So you've got three paintings, you've got the two individual paintings, and then you've got this combination painting. Whoa! And that, I mean, I don't know how on earth that will. I guess it does. You know, it's in there somewhere. It took me a few years to kind of get my head around that one, and it's such a simple idea, isn't it? Anybody else?
Have you ever considered printing a third layer? Or
A third layer? Yeah, open collab with the printer.
On one sheet?
Yeah, so the open collab thing that I showed that I was working on at Villa Massimo earlier in the year, there's a minimum of 3 layers. Mm-hmm. I know it's cheating because it's cheap laser printing and all the rest of it, but it's a very good question. It's a very good question. Yeah. I don't know if I've still got the screens for these, but it would be quite interesting. Maybe I can do it just for the rest of my life. I can just sort of, you know, put things together in sort of different constellations, and all the work's done, and I just reconfigure it. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to remember that. But for this one, I think I already had enough with just like two unrelated things interacting. I think to add a third one. I mean, let's see how it develops, but at this moment in time, that was enough for me, I think. Thank you, that's a good question, I like that. You got no questions? Yeah?
Is there a reason for the black?
I'm sorry?
Is there a reason for black?
Oh yeah, that's something else that's incredibly important. They're not black. This is not black. I spent 2 days mixing this colour. It's best seen in daylight. It's actually blue. It's a very, very dark blue. You can appreciate it slightly on the unframed stuff on the walls, okay? Behind the glass completely sort of screws up the effect, but you will see, when you see my ink alongside black, or if you were to stand in your black jacket by the wallpaper, they would suddenly start, not to pop, but you would suddenly start to notice that there is actually a very calculated blue tone. 2 days, people. And everyone thinks they're black. I mean, I wanted them to look black until it depends how closely you look at them. You know, then if one person in 100 suddenly went, oh, hang on, it's not black after all. That's enough for me. I'm a bit like that. It's a bit strange, isn't it? Anyway, it would have been so much easier to use black. But anyway. It's raining outside. No, it's not raining. Okay.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
It is about with the collab and some of the other projects, the icons, the symbols, and the images that you are choosing.
Yeah.
They are random, but I mean.
In the open collab, they're not my images.
They are not.
No. I just give somebody this kind of framework and I explain how the whole thing works, and then they have to generate their own content.
And in the previous one, what was the name of
the stencil book?
Yes, and everything. So
in
a way here, there's also shapes, no? That you mentioned random and everything. But how long goes the randomness and the selection?
I'm sorry.
How wide is random, or how long you go with the randomness and the control of it? No, is there a?
You decide. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there is a sudden sort of cut-off when something stops to become, it ceases to be figurative and becomes abstract. I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, and for you, like, it's very important. Like in this exhibition, for example, everything is very geometric, no? So it's random, but there's a still not that one maybe, but there's lots of geometry on the or patterns.
Geometric.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's like really. That's how I see it. Yeah, there's an ambiguity with it.
It's getting very bad.
Yeah.
That's 10 years living in Germany. Yeah. It's making it work. Okay, works. Only joking. And I said it with great respect. But thank you, yeah. I don't know about you, but I need a drink. So I'm going to thank you again very, very much for coming.